Hello. I am once again asking for 20 to 25 minutes of your time to share my apparently rather controversial opinions on the funny little spacemen. Having recently ranked each of the Space Marine legions, I thought it only made sense to talk about their dads as well. Also, yes, I promise the Thousand Suns video will be next week's video. The research for the Christmas video has been taking up all of my time. Hopefully some carefully curated Primarch slop will suffice for now. Before we get into the video properly, I would just like to say a huge thank you to my channel members, Vort, Cersei, Victory Kaiser and Kraydog, for supporting me. Unlike the Legion ranking video, which was based purely on vibes and my own personal opinion on each Legion, this ranking will be based on how effective I think each Primarch was, both in terms of raw melee skill, as well as a commander and statesman. I cannot promise it will be free of bias though, I have some very strong opinions about these fictional characters. So, starting with the Lion, he was one of the best, if not outright the best, duelists among the Primarchs. After his big nap and subsequent return to the setting, he managed to banish Angron, a feat which even Sanguinius struggled to do. Admittedly, Sangi wasn't at his peak at that time, and the Lion had just found the Emperor's shield, but it's still a rather impressive feat. He also technically won in a duel against Leman, although it was pretty much a duel until Leman decided to start laughing and forget about the fight. He was also a very good commander, being repeatedly referred to as the best tactician out of the Primarchs. I don't know what the difference is between tactician and strategist, but apparently there is one. He was immensely loyal to the Imperium, requiring no extra reward for his service other than the knowledge that he himself was loyal. With that being said, he was a bit of a dick. He had no real sense of empathy, and he struggled to see from other people's point of view and see how his own actions might make them feel slighted. This is not an ideal trait for a leader, notably causing the whole Fallen debacle. I do empathise with not being able to see from other people's point of view, but it does cause a bit of an issue for a head of state, as seen during the Imperium Secundus. So, with all that being said, I think the Lion is an A-tier Primarch. Not quite S, but he's very close. Fulgrim was hot. Those are my notes. He was also a decent melee combatant compared to his brothers. He 1v1'd an Avatar of Cain and managed to win pretty easily, not to mention the headless elephant in the room. He was also responsible for putting Guilliman into stasis for 10,000 years, though this was post-ascension to demonhood, so we can't really count it. With that being said, he was far from the best duelist among his brothers, and he was also not a great general or statesman. He was incredibly insecure and very obsessed with appearing perfect in the eyes of others, leading to him unnecessarily throwing lives away in order to quickly conquer Lair, which also led to him becoming a snake demon. So, overall, he's not great. I would say he's probably he's C or D. We will put him in C. He'll go in C. Perturabo canonically plays Warhammer. Or, well, maybe not Warhammer, but he's really good at miniature wargames. We know this from actual textual evidence. He is a gifted engineer and architect, even compared to the other Primarchs. His Primarch power, if they all have one, which I feel like they do, I think they all do have something unique to them. But Perturabo's was the ability to look at something and innately be able to see the flaws in it, which was why he could constantly see the Eye of Terror. This, while useful, did make him a little bit of a pessimist. That might be a bit of an understatement. And he was a bit cold-hearted. He viewed his own men and himself as a resource and tool to be used, rather than something valuable in and of themselves. All in all, I'm going to put him in A. Slightly below Lionel, but still pretty high up there. Although, if he was to become a ruler of his own empire, he would probably need a Malcador analogue to handle diplomacy. Moving on to the Khan, we don't really have too much information about him, at least that's relevant to this tier list. He was confident that he could beat Fulgrim in a fight. He beat Demon Mortarion, although he very nearly died. Though this fight is odd for this tier list, because he seems to be toying with Mortarion. He seems to be trying to beat Mortarion by fighting like Mortarion, rather than playing to his strengths. So it's unclear. He did seem to be a reasonably solid commander. Not particularly great compared to his brothers, but he seemed competent enough from what we saw of him. With that being said, I am going to have to take a few points off for him being a loner. He seems to have little interest in the Imperium or governance as a whole outside of being generally pro-humanity, but that was as far as he really went with it. All things considered, I think the Khan is a B. I think he's a reasonably effective Primarch, but he's not anything special compared to his brothers, at least in terms of raw strength. Supposedly the executioner of the Primarchs, Leman Russ did handily beat Magnus in a duel. He also seems to be uniquely anti-psychic compared to his brothers. He has those weird Skyrim shouts that cancel out warp powers. He is a bit of a dick, and not really head of state material, and he also seemed to be about equal to the Lion in raw combat prowess. He does gain a few points for being part of Guilliman's Dauntless Few, who Guilliman believed he could defeat any foe in the galaxy at the side of. This wasn't based on Guilliman's assessment of their martial or strategic prowess, but rather how he and his legion fought beside them, but it is fair to assume that any of the four are at least above average compared to their brothers. So, Leman Russ is going in B tier, purely because Guilliman vouched for him. If Guilliman hadn't vouched for him, he would be C, but he moves up a little bit. Rogal Dorn defeated Fulgrim on the Walls of Terror, and managed to kill Alpharius. Maybe. He is very autistic, but his heart is in the right place, and I feel like if he took a few anger management courses, he would be a decent statesman. He was a very competent commander, especially during sieges, and notably it was him that the Emperor entrusted with the defence of Terror, rather than any of his brothers. He was also another member of the Dauntless Few, so I feel like it would be unfair to put Dorn anywhere below A tier. I'm going to put him below Perturabo though, just to satisfy my own personal biases. Curze was among the physically weakest of the Primarchs. He lost to the Lion in a straight fight pretty decisively. However, that is only in a straight fight. In terms of guerrilla warfare, he came very close to 2v1ing the Lion and Guilliman during the Imperium Secundus. He would have killed both of them if the Pharaoh's device hadn't come in to save them. He does have the whole future sight thing that, probably helps in duels. I'm not a swordsman, but I'd imagine being able to see the future helps a not insignificant amount. However, he is absolutely batshit insane, so that's got to take a few points off. And he's also an absolutely awful statesman. Look at Nostromo, or rather, look at the burned out husk of Nostromo after he exploded it. It pains me, because I do love Curze, but I'm going to have to put him in D. I cannot, with a clear conscience, put him anywhere higher. I do, now looking at this list, realise that I have not in my notes put anyone below D tier, but there's an E and a... Hold on. Ignore everything you saw below D for the previous 15 minutes of this video, please. Sanguinius was the perfect Primarch. He was among the best warriors. He had the precognition of Curze without the being completely batshit insane. He could fly, which was a big help. He was a very well respected and very capable commander. He was universally loved by in almost the other 19 Primarchs. They all loved him, with the possible exception of Curze, but he was another member of the Dauntless Few. He banished a just juiced up Angron during the Siege of Terror, while not being anywhere near his prime. He was fucking knackered, and he still managed to kill Angron. Or, banish Angron, but same thing. And outside of combat, he did a pretty decent job running the Imperium Secundus, despite Guilliman and the Lion just constantly bickering. So, I cannot in good conscience put Sanger anywhere other than S. Ferrus is a pretty difficult one, because he had about 4 pages of screen time before he died. He was the biggest and strongest Primarch, with the exception of Vulkan. He seemed to be a reasonably competent commander, aside from the whole losing his head and charging off to Istvan to die. At Istvan, he seemed to be beating Fulgrim before Fulgrim got juiced up by chaos power, but he was a bit dull. I don't think he'd be a great head of state. He was a bit too angry to be among the best commanders of the Primarchs, and he was definitely very middle of the pack in terms of melee combat capability. So he's going in C. He's going above Fulgrim, but Angron has absolutely nothing going for him aside from the melee capability side, which is admittedly pretty impressive. As a demon, he is an immensely powerful combatant, though he loses a few points for the whole Khorne Berserker thing being a bit of a weakness strategically. Before he became a demon prince, when he was just a normal Primarch, he did have no aura. I mean, Khan told us that, so that's got to take points off. He is just as insane as Curze, with even less command ability. So he's going with Curze, but slightly below. Guilliman is a bit of an interesting one for the purposes of this tier list. In terms of duels, he really doesn't have that great of a track record. He's maybe top 10 in terms of raw combat potential, but it's definitely not his strength. However, he has insane strategic planning abilities, and is far and away the best statesman of his brothers. After the heresy, it was him that was appointed regent of the Imperium, rather than any of the other remaining loyalist Primarchs, which I think does say a lot about his abilities. He is currently running the Imperium as regent again, and he's doing as good a job as can probably be expected. I mean, it's a bit of an unfair position to be in, but he's still doing alright. So, with that being said, he's going in S, but he's going below Sangi. Sangi is definitely better, he's a better all-rounder than Guilliman, but Guilliman is still a very valuable asset to the Imperium. Mortarion, as far as I can tell, doesn't really seem to be that great at anything on this tier list. As a demon, he has lost to both the Khan and Guilliman, although Guilliman did have a bit of help from the Emperor, so maybe that's not too fair. He isn't noted as being a particularly gifted commander or strategist, and he's also an insecure little man-child, so he's going in D tier. I'm going to try to be very fair to Magnus here. I want you to know that I am trying my best. In a 1v1, he did lose to Russ, although Russ does seem to be a specialised anti-psyker, so that's maybe not too fair. In a 1v1 against any of the other Primarchs on this list, I think Magnus cleans up. I think he is just too powerful of a sorcerer to lose to anyone except the guy whose whole thing is killing sorcerers. With that being said, I do think he's a fucking moron. He constantly believes that he is right and the most intelligent being in the universe, even when the evidence to the contrary is right there in front of his face. He tried to warn Horus about the dangers of the warp, and moronically managed to turn him to chaos in the process. He attempted to warn the Emperor after moronically turning Horus to chaos, and failed in that as well. And most importantly, he was responsible for the Edict of Nicaea happening. The people arrayed against him gave clear, concise, reasonable arguments against psychers, and he decided to read a fucking poem. So he's a moron, and he's going in B tier, and I'm being incredibly generous just because he is so powerful a sorcerer. Horus is repeatedly referred to as the greatest military mind of the Primarch. He was universally loved and respected, even more so than Sangi, before, the chaos thing. And perhaps most tellingly, out of all 19 of the Primarchs, it was Horus who was named War Master rather than any of the others. I don't know if we ever see him personally fight, at least, you know, another Primarch. I don't think we have a real scale of Horus compared to the rest of the Primarchs. He's probably somewhere slightly above average, though. I can't imagine him being particularly weak. He did fall to chaos and start a galaxy-wide civil war. That has got to take a few points off. But, all things considered, I think he was probably above Sanguinius. I think Horus was supposed to be the best of the Primarchs, originally. Lorgar, to get this out of the way straight away, is fucking useless in a 1v1. He had to be saved from Corax by Curze, so he's not very good at that. But what he does have going for him is that he's probably the second most powerful Psyker out of the Primarchs. He is also an incredibly charismatic leader. He was the mastermind behind the heresy, and he is capable of inspiring a lot of loyalty from his subjects. So I think as a head of state, he would do quite well, is what I'm trying to say. I think, all things considered, he's going towards the top of B, but he's, yeah, exactly in the middle. That's perfect. Vulkan is the biggest and strongest of the Primarchs, but I don't believe he's ever referred to as a particularly skilled duelist, or strategist, or tactician, come to think of it. But he is incredibly moral, and he instills a lot of good values and loyalty in his sons. He's also, in terms of being a head of state, immortal, which is, I don't think I can understate how big of a deal that is. Like, succession crises are such a huge factor in the downfall of empires that having someone who literally can't die at the head of your empire would be, it's a game changer. So I think purely because he is immortal and would be a steady, consistent leader for the whole time that his empire would exist, I think he has to go in S. I don't think being perpetual is just such a big deal in terms of a head of state. The sneaky little bird boy is just a generally competent and dependable Primarch. I don't recall him ever being noted as particularly weak in any area, but also not particularly strong in any area aside from being sneaky. I think he's pretty much the definition of a B tier. In much the same way as Vulkan got bumped up for being a perpetual and therefore solving the concept of succession crises, I think Alpharius and Omegon have to go down a few tiers purely based on the amount of imposters that they would give rise to. They were the smallest and weakest of the Primarchs, with the possible exception of Lorgar, but without his magic to make up for it. And being sneaky and mysterious isn't a particularly valuable trait for a head of state, other than the difficulty around assassinating them. So I think these two are going to go in D, but they're going to go above Mortarion, because fuck him. So that is my tier list of the Primarchs, in terms of their effectiveness in combat, statesmanship and command. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much. It really does mean a lot. Like, subscribe, all the rest, and I'll see you all in the next video.